Good afternoon, everyone. Today we will be discussing a very well-known film in Latin America called In the Time of the Butterflies. In this presentation, we will be going over the four Mirabal sisters and what they accomplished in the Dominican Republic country in their fight against Rafael Trujillo.
In this presentation, we will cover in more detail some background history of the author of the book as well as the director of the film. Then we will discuss the origin of the true story the film is based off of, the background of each character, and show a trailer for a better understanding of the film. Following this, we will discuss the plot of the film and some important key symbols and themes throughout the film and book.
Now I will be discussing the author of the book as well as the director of the movie. First off, we have Julia Alvarez. She was born March 27, 1950 in New York. When she was 3 months old, her family moved back to the Dominican Republic, and she spent the first 10 years of her childhood in the Dominican Republic, up until her father's involvement in a political rebellion forced her family to flee the country. Many of Alvarez's works are influenced by her experiences as a Dominican American and focus heavily on issues of immigration, assimilation, and identity. She is known for her works that examine cultural expectations of women, both in the Dominican Republic and in the United States, for the rigorous investigations of cultural stereotypes. She is an American New Formalist poet, novelist, and essayist. She rose to prominence with the novels How the Garcias Lost Their Accents in 1991 and In the Time of the Butterflies in 1994. Many literary critics regard her to be one of the most significant Latina writers, and she has achieved critical and commercial success on an international scale. Now let's move on to the director of film, Mariano Barroso. He was born on the 26th of December in 1959 in San Just Desvern, Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain. He abandoned his university studies to dedicate himself to film. After obtaining several prizes at several institutes with a variety of shorts, he left to study film at the American Film Institute. He's a Spanish film director, screenwriter, and teacher. As a teacher, he has worked with the film schools in Cuba and Madrid and with the Mendes Pelayo International University. He has directed more than 20 films since 1982. Since the 9th of June 2018, he has been the president of the Spanish Academy of Cinematographic Arts and Sciences.
Origin of the story. The Time of the Butterflies is a film based on true events from the 1960s in the Dominican Republic. From 1930 to 1961, General Rafael Trujillo held absolute power to control the Dominican Republic. His secret alliance with the church aristocrats, intellectuals, and the press were the foundation of his dictatorship. His formula to reign in power was just to murder anyone who opposed him. More than 30,000 people were executed during his time of ruling. This resulted in Dominican revolutionary activists to form an alliance to go against the dictatorship of Trujillo, led by the Mirabal sisters. The Mirabal sisters are important figures in the history of the Dominican Republic because of their fight against Trujillo's oppressive leadership. They are celebrated for their contributions of freedom and the rights of Dominican women.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the characters of the film. So we're going to start off with the four Mirabal sisters and a little bit about them, then we'll move on to Rafael Trujillo. So Patria is the first, and she is the oldest, and at first she wants to become a nun, but later on she meets a handsome guy named Pedrito, so she falls in love and gets married. But she still practices her religion vigorously. She opens her home to the resistance, allowing them to store their guns and have meetings there. Devoted to her family, she pushes for the release of her husband from prison and is later killed alongside two of her sisters by Trujillo's men. Next up, we have Dede. She is the second of the Mirabal sisters and is the only surviving sister after the November 25th murderers of the three sisters by Trujillo's men. She has a good head for business and helps run the family farm, but she does not join the resistance because her husband forbids it. Dede keeps her sister's memory alive in real life by creating museums to share their story with the public after their deaths. Number 3, we have the most prevalent in the film, Minerva. The film is based on her story about wanting to become a lawyer and all this stuff, but in the books, it is more about all four sisters and their points of views. So for the film, she has been politically active against the Trujillo regime. Her friendship with Sinita, a schoolmate at the beginning of the film, is what hardens her fight against Trujillo, and her resistance to his sexual advances in the ballroom. That's what starts the events that lands her father in jail. The fearless and outgoing Minerva and her husband Manolo also end up in prison for their resistance activities. Minerva is killed alongside two of her sisters by Trujillo's men. Last but not least, we have Maria Teresa Mirabal, aka Mate, in the film. So she's the fourth and youngest Mirabal sister and is the most joyful, never quite finding true love until she joins the resistance when she falls in love with Leonardo. And he is like one of the descendants that are working alongside with her sister Minerva. So Mate manages to maintain a positive attitude even while in prison. She is killed alongside two of her sisters by Trujillo's men. Last but not least, we have Rafael Trujillo. So he was born in 1991 and died in 1961. He is the cruel dictator who rules the Dominican Republic. Trujillo brings economic prosperity to the upper and the middle classes, but he also takes away people's civil liberties and kills or tortures anyone who gets in the way of what he wants for himself. His prosperity for young women, sexual partners, is notorious, and Minerva's rejection of his advances towards her begins his resentment of the Mirabal family. Their role in the resistance makes him determined to eradicate the Mirabal sisters by ordering their murders.
You speak out against El Jefe and prove you disappear. If your family asks too many questions, prove they disappeared too. He killed my father. He killed my brother. He killed my uncles. Like he's killed thousands of people in this country. Now are you listening to me? There are many things you don't know about your General Trujillo.
Do you know that Trujillo has a secret campaign to make our population whiter than it is? He secretly murders thousands of black Haitians that cross the border because, listen to this, he claims that they're contaminating the Dominican race. Welcome to the revolution. Butterfly.
You're afraid not to get involved, not to fight back, because you realize that no one you care about is safe anymore.
Polo and I have made a list with the people who have disappeared last month. We have more than 300 names on it. We need to make copies and distribute them so people know what Trujillo is doing.
My brother's only crime was to be out of a job. He was taken by the police and accused of vagrancy. Nobody has been able to tell me where he is, but I'm sure he's in one of those camps that Trujillo has out in the fields. They treat them like prisoners and make them work until they die.
I have no interest in ties, winning or losing. With me or against me. It's what I believe in. You may leave.
Now we will be showing you
The plot of the story. On November 25th, 1960, three Mirabal sisters were murdered for their part in an underground group to overthrow the government. Minerva was the creator of the Butterfly Movement to plot against the dictatorship for the fairness and equality for all. The sisters make a political equipment to overthrow the Trujillo political authority. They were harassed, persecuted, and imprisoned, while all of their family suffers in retaliation from the Military Intelligence Services, other known as SIM. On the way back home from visiting their husbands who were originally in jail, the sisters were caught by the Trujillo men and beaten and strangled to death and thrown off a mountain in their car to make their deaths look like an accident. Dominicans did not believe the cover-up, resulting in an uprising that held the takedown of El Jefe 6 months later. The children of the Mirabal sisters then held important posts in their later democratic government in the Dominican Republic. The International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women is celebrated globally on November 25th, the day that the Mirabal sisters, other known as Las Mariposas, met their end for fighting for Dominican freedom.
So now we're going to be moving on to the themes of the movie. So first off, number one, we have family. So Julia Alvarez weaves the theme of family throughout the entire film, and the sisters all have very different personalities, but they are extremely close. The family attends church together, and the sisters look after one another in school and at home. The effect of tragedy on family is also revealed, beginning with the character of their father. The effects of Trujillo's cruelty on other families is what makes Patria realize that she can no longer stay out of the resistance. Family ties become the engine behind the resistance. When Minerva and Mate are imprisoned, along with Manolo, Leonardo, Pedrito, and Nelson, the rest of the family visits them and continuously pressures the authorities to release their family members. When people are in trouble, the strength of the family ties saves them. The strength of the Mirabal family is critical to the entire movie of the Mirabal sisters, before and after their tragic murders. Next up, we have violence and power. Many of the gory details of violence inflicted by Trujillo's men, particularly in the torture chambers, are based on real accounts from people who survived the Trujillo era. Trujillo was one of the cruelest dictators of the 20th century. In order to retain his power over the country, he simply liquidated his rivals and anyone who contradicted him as in any way. As the rest of the world began to realize that Trujillo was abusing his people, he took the disapproval as an opportunity to exert even more power. Trujillo behaved as if he were a god, and the propaganda he forced on his people spoke of him in the same vein as religious texts speak of a deity. We also saw the emotional violence inflicted on the Dominican people by the censorship and the control of Trujillo exerted over every aspect of their lives. For some people, such as Minerva, it fires up their resolve to fight back. For others, such as Dede, it sends them cowering to the corner. Next up, we have freedom. So the theme of freedom is closely tied to the theme of violence and power. Trujillo exacts a huge personal price for his people in order to make the Dominican Republic a more prosperous country. The people's civil liberties are gone, as well as the lack of freedom of speech, press, and action, which all become the new normal. The 14th of June movement did not arise just in response to the violence inflicted by the Dominican people by Trujillo's men. It was also an effort to restore people's rights to their own thoughts, their own ways of living, and their own destinies. The people who joined the resistance late in the game, however, had accepted their loss of freedom until their violence became too frequent and horrible to ignore. Next up, we have resilience. Resilience requires a guiding principle to stick to and keep in the forefront of one's mind, whether that principle be a religious ideal or a secular one. Minerva's ideals and determination to stick with them gave her sustenance as she heads into dangerous situations and secretly works against Trujillo. Lastly, we have religion. So the Dominican Republic is a highly Catholic country, and the Catholic Church dominates the girls' lives, second only to the influence of Trujillo. In the film, we see the impact of the neutral stance the church has taken concerning Trujillo's regime. When the church finally takes a stand, well, it seems too late, and is nonetheless inspirational. Trujillo often likens himself to God, and Alvarez explores the relationship between dictators, cults, and religion. The line of worship is blurred by the followers of Trujillo, and he is viewed as a benefactor of the nation. He is all-seeing and constantly watching, much like God. And just as God gives gifts and punishments, Trujillo can be malevolent or benevolent at will.
Symbols. As there are many symbols amongst the book, the film highlights the most important symbol of the butterfly. Butterflies are often viewed as harmless and delicate, and they are commonly seen as a symbol for freedom. Throughout the fragile nature of butterflies, it suggests that the girls are not viewed at first as a significant threat. As women, they don't seem to pose a threat to Trujillo. He gambles with Minerva over letting her go to law school. He gives her a chance to win what she wants, and he wouldn't do this if he was intimidated. Despite the lack of intimidation, Minerva was successful in making Trujillo give her what she desired the most, the opportunity to go to law school. Trujillo's lack of intimidation of the woman considered the butterflies demonstrated the society's common view of women at the time, that women were inferior to men. The Mirabal sisters used a code named Las Mariposas, which means the butterflies in Spanish. Butterflies in this instant are a symbol of freedom, flight, and the ability to rise above tragedy. In the lives of the Mirabal sisters, butterflies also symbol their personal strengths as they discover when they become adults. Each sister, in their own way, bursts out of the constraints imposed on them and discover their strengths, even in Didi's case when she took a long time to become free. She took the responsibility to stay with her father while her other sisters went to school. Then, upon their return and they grew into their lives, she was found always to be home taking care of her parents as well as her nieces and nephews. In a way, like the butterfly is inside the cocoon, they were able to rise above their mishaps and they were able to move forward and continue moving on. In conclusion, at the end of the day, family and freedom overrule oppression and solitude. Thanks to the inspiration of the four Mirabal sisters, and like them, the other Dominicans gained the courage to go against one of the cruelest dictators, Rafael Trujillo. Thank you for watching, and remember, long live the butterflies.